One of the true veterans of the United Nations is a man who has often been referred to as a real pillar of the UN. He himself sometimes likes to refer to himself as a citizen general. He dates back to the beginnings of the UN at Dunbarton Oaks at San Francisco. Currently is the president of the Security Council, formerly the president of the General Assembly. Carlos Romulo, a name well known and well respected in the United States and all over the world. General, now that the 12th General Assembly is a part of past history, in the light of what has happened here the past 3.5 months, would you say that the world is moving toward or away from global peace?
I'm glad you asked me that question, because the answer is definitely towards peace. And I will tell you why. The Sputnik has come, and people thought that with the Sputnik, with the position of strength that Soviet Russia seems to have achieved, that we are moving towards war. Well, the United Nations showed that that is not so. The Sputnik has not in any way intimidated the United Nations. And you realize that when the disarmament resolution was brought up and Russia threatened to withdraw from that disarmament provision if another resolution was approved, the Western resolution, 57 votes voted for the Free World's resolution, which was a rebuff to Soviet Russia despite its Sputnik. Then again, when the Credentials Committee decided to refuse to recognize the Qaeda regime, Soviet Russia and its satellites spoke lengthily and vigorously denouncing that decision of the committee. The committee decided in favor of the political committee, decided in favor of the resolution. That was another rebuff.
Nevertheless, Mr. Ambassador, the Hungarian problem is still very much with us today.
Yes, it is very much with us today, and it shows that when you deal in the United Nations with an aggressor nation, the United Nations is really powerless. But when you deal with nations like Britain and France, as in the case of the Suez Canal, when the United Nations condemned them, well, they withdrew.
You made reference to the Sputnik. Now, one of the great men of our generation, Winston Churchill, I believe, originated the phrase balance of terror. What effect has the advance of Russian rocketry have on the rest of the nations in relation to control of outer space and Sputnik developments?
Well, I think Sir Winston Churchill said that we have a peace by mutual terror. Well, with the Sputnik, there has been a shift in the balance of power. And with the underprivileged countries, with the uncommitted, there has been quite an effect. And the effect is this. Russia, 40 years ago, was an underprivileged country, as many of the underprivileged countries are now. These underprivileged countries now see in Russia a nation that, like as they were 40 years ago, has succeeded, however, in outpacing the West in technology. Now that gives these uncommitted or these underprivileged countries some dangerous thought. And I think it is very well for America to find out what these thoughts are.
They will need their allies and their friends, the smaller nations included, more than ever before, you think?
Yes, I think that in fact the small nations and the middle-sized nations that should stand in awe and fear of the Sputnik are now in a position of strength, and their importance has grown. And this would seem ironical, but it is true, because now they are wooed and courted by the big powers, because as the balance of power among the big powers is equalized, the importance of the small and the middle-sized powers increases correspondingly. For example, the United States, until you have your intercontinental ballistic missile, while you still have your intermediate range ballistic missile, you need bases. And needing bases, you need friends and allies. And so therefore, the small powers, the middle-sized powers, knowing that, realize that their importance has grown as a result of these new advances in modern technology.
Mr. Ambassador, Lester Pearson, in his recent acceptance of the Nobel Peace Prize, said that the major responsibility for future world peace rested mainly on the shoulders of Soviet Russia and the United States. Now, there's been a great to-do about the vocabulary of getting together between the two nations, peaceful coexistence, containment, various policies. Mr. Pearson is of the opinion, and I ask you now if you agree, that the West must readjust, must re-examine its policy, which he claims is stymied by rigidity, and renegotiate on new terms and new devices and new techniques with Soviet Russia.
Unquestionably, Lester Pearson is right in his statement that the main responsibility lies on the shoulders of both the United States and Soviet Russia. But also, however, it must be said that on the shoulders of the allies of the United States also rests part of the responsibility, so that if they do not embarrass the United States by following policies that place Soviet Russia in a stronger position, such as their policies on colonialism, they will be sharing the responsibility with the United States if they do not follow a pattern that will make them assume a position that will help strengthen the United States. But aside from that, again, also their small and middle-sized powers should share the responsibility, because these small-sized and middle-sized powers, if they have the guts to stand by their convictions and refuse to be in the shadow of one of the two big powers, then they can assert themselves. And since they outnumber these small two big powers, they can force world public opinion to make these two powers follow what they want.
Mr. Ambassador, you're known throughout the world as a man of optimistic outlook. Now, in the light of the slow evolvement toward world peace, do you still retain that optimism? Can we and our children in turn look to the United Nations as an instrument toward that goal?
Unquestionably. I have no doubt about that. I have immeasurable faith in the United Nations. The United Nations will make mistakes. It is not perfect. It has its shortcomings. But in the long run, it will assert itself, because it represents a moral idea of peace and brotherhood. And because it is moral, it is invincible. And so I have absolute faith that sooner or later, the United Nations will be able to achieve its purposes as enshrined in our charter.
General Romulo, it's been very kind of you to come down here today. Good luck to you as President of the Security Council this month, and thank you, sir, very much.
You're entirely welcome.